vaccinated.
So when it's your turn, roll up your sleeves.
And let's get to the finish line together.
Tim Klein, followed by Chris Ryan.
Good morning, Coach.
Hey, Jim.
I wanted to ask you about blitz pickup for running backs, and specifically when you have a young player who maybe wasn't asked to do that much in college. What are kind of the initial points you try to make with that guy?
Right. Well, there are really, I would say, three big aspects to blitz pickup, and it's a very I would say difficult job. The first one is actually blocking the guy. Even though you know who to block, learning the blocking techniques and learning, who you're blocking on a blitz, because there are a lot of different blitzers. You could end up blocking a DB, which is more common in sub situations, although you could see it any time. Or you could, block a different type of linebacker. Blocking, say, White would be a lot different than blocking Hightower or somebody like that. So that's, or Davis last week, or, whoever. So blocking them, that's one problem. The second problem is figuring out whether they're blitzing or not. So linebackers will try to make it look like they're blitzing to keep you from getting out into the pass pattern, and as a back, you have to recognize if he's blitzing, then you got to block him. If he's not blitzing, he's just trying to keep you in, then you want to get out so that you can be part of the passing game and also take him out of the way of the pocket and the quarterback and the offensive line and everything and clear it out so that, it's more definitive as to who the rushers are and who they aren't, and give the quarterback another option in the passing game rather than be trapped in there blocking a guy who doesn't have to cover you because you don't get out in the pattern. And then of course, the other problem is figuring out who to block. And so depending on what the defense does, there are a lot of offensive systems that give the running back, make him responsible for two players. Sometimes he's only responsible for one, but if you only make him responsible for one, then if they bring the other guy, if you have 6 players in protection and they bring a 7th guy, then if you've picked out the wrong guy to leave free, then he's running at the quarterback, and that creates a lot of problems. If you give the running back 2 guys, then you can handle 6 of the 7 blitzers, not all 7, but that's, if they bring all 7, then the quarterback knows he's got to make a decision and get rid of the ball because you only have 6 blockers. But if they bring 6 guys out of 7 and you can block those 6, then that changes everything for the quarterback, and so he's actually got it picked up. So when you combine all those things with the back, and again, whether it's our back or another team's back, it's a lot of the systematically the issues are the same. Figuring out which guy it is that you're looking for, or which 2 guys maybe you're looking for, depending on what the protection scheme is. Recognizing whether they're actually blitzing or not, or whether they're just trying to keep you in from getting out into the pattern. And then, as I said, then when they come, actually blocking them is another story. And then, what gets even more difficult for a back is when they run a pick stunt between a linebacker that the back's responsible for and a lineman, and a defensive lineman that the offensive lineman is responsible for. So instead of linemen working together on games, now you involve the back working together on a pick stunt or a game with an offensive lineman, and that gets, I'd say, a little more difficult. So, those are the things that a good back in blitz pickup in a passing game. A lot of that doesn't happen on first down, play action passes, and things like that. But when you get into third down, sub protections, and passing game and all that, every team in the league has to figure out how they're going to deal with those problems and what they're going to ask the back to do, and and all that. So if you free release them, that's easy. But now you only have 5 blockers, or you involve your tight end in the protection, however you want to do it. And again, that's one way to alleviate some of the back pickup problems, but then it pushes the problem somewhere else. So. But it's a very underrated, I would say, very underrated part of the back's job, and especially on third down, the difficulty of that job is, it's significant. It's not, you just don't throw somebody in there and say, well, we'll put this guy in on third down. If you're going to give him any kind of pass protection assignments, it could get kind of, it could be involved.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
And Chris, I'm going to come back to you. We're going to go to Mike Reese, followed by Michael Hurley.
Thanks. Bill, what would you say the team gets the most out of when you hold the practice inside Gillette?
Just the overall environment in there. The wind patterns in the kicking game, we get to experience those kind of the way they are, and that can affect some directional kicking, and obviously the returning that goes along with that. That's probably the biggest thing. But just general familiarity with certain landmarks that each stadium has, and so forth. I think there's a little bit of a small amount of value of getting more familiar with that. I mean, we play in away stadiums half the year anyway, so I don't want to overrate that, but yeah, those would be a couple of things we get out of it.
Next question, Michael Hurley, followed by Ian Steele.
Good morning, Bill. I know you've taken 1,000 Tom Brady questions this week, so not specifically about him, but you did mention the other day how he's close to the all-time yardage record, something I'm sure you'd appreciate more if he wasn't playing against you this week. But I'm just wondering, does the NFL stop the game in that instance? Does the NFL do that, or do you have a say in that as the home team if there's an acknowledgement during the game of that?
Yeah, I have no idea. Honestly, we're going to try to keep him from gaining too many yards passing the ball. So, yeah, I don't know. You'd have to talk to somebody else about that.
Okay, thanks. Just curious.
Next question, Ian Steele, followed by Doug Kyde.
Hey, Bill. Another Brady question here. Do you think that you would have had the success that you have had here if Tom Brady wasn't your quarterback?
Yeah, of course not.
What about having him in that partnership, I guess, brought you guys over the top for those years?
Well, I mean, we talked about that for 2 decades. I think I've been on the record, I don't know, dozens of times saying there's no quarterback I would rather have than Tom Brady, and I still feel that way. I was very lucky to have Tom as the quarterback to coach him, and I mean, he was as good as any coach could ever ask for.
Thank you.
Next question, Doug Kyde, followed by Aaron Stevens.
Hi, Bill. In a week like this with potential distractions, do you need to remind players to avoid those and focus on what they need to do? Or do you essentially trust them at this point to know that on their own?
Yeah, each week has its own challenges besides the game itself, the actual competition on the field, the week of it, whether could be a lot of things, certainly travel on away games and whatever the unique circumstances are of the game that you're playing. So we always talk about those. Each game's different. Each one has its own, has its own elements to it. I don't think any two are really alike, besides the fact that teams are different. But they're, some are more similar than others, but there's always an element of something that's a little bit, different this week, or a different something we have to, I won't say deal with, but, as part of the week.
Thank you.
Alan Siegel, followed by Tyler Bronski.
Morning, Bill.
Yeah.
Bill, in your career, you faced a lot of great quarterbacks. I'm wondering, of those great quarterbacks, and I'm sure Tom is in that group, are there any quarterbacks that you just cannot fool, with whatever you line up, and that execution becomes even more important than it usually is?
Yeah, well, as you said, I've faced a lot of great quarterbacks as a coach in my career, but again, you're looking at an entire team. You have to look at all the people on the team, not just the quarterback, but who his receivers are, who his tight end is, what the running game is, what the offensive line is, how they do things. And, ultimately you have to play good team defense, and particularly against a passing team. like the Bucs are. They're the best passing team in the league. You have to defend the passing game in its totality, the pass rush, the coverage on all the receivers, because they usually get a lot of receivers out, other than in some of their play actions that are tied in with the running game. But in the drop back game, they usually get 5 receivers out, and so you have to, have a way to cover that. And they don't run the same play all the time, so they do a lot of different things. They present a lot of different challenges. They try to attack the defenses, and you try to, defend the passing game. In general terms, but also situationally, obviously the best you can against each one of those passing attacks, and they're all different. But there's always some similarities conceptually, but the individual players and the receivers and the protections and all that are vary from team to team, and so you try to defend them the best you can.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep, you're welcome.
So Tyler Blonsky and looks like Andrew Kelly.
Hey, Bill. Buccaneers activated Antonio Brown from the COVID list ahead of Sunday's game. You kind of just touched on it a bit, but how does that change, how does their plan change when he's out there, and for you guys, how you approach, their receivers when he's added to that mix for them?
Right. Well, you'd have to ask them how it changes. But they. We expected AB to be there. Miller was put down, so Brown's skills versus Miller's skills. They're both good receivers. They're a little different. They're used. They've been used a little bit differently in the offense down there, but they're both good, and so we'll prepare for AB and not prepare for Miller. But again, they have good depth and good skill, good quality at all positions: quarterback, running back, tight end, receiver. And in the passing game, we'll have to. They're all a problem, so we'll have to deal with all of them. And some of that depends on who else is out there as well. It's just because a certain receiver, or tight end, or running back is on the field, that's one thing. But a lot of times it depends on who's out there with them. In terms of how you're trying to defend that grouping, not just that individual player. So, all those things become factors. But, AB looks good, like he always does. He's quick. He's tough after the catch. He's got good speed, good receiving ability. He's a big-time playmaker, and so, he'll be a problem when he's out there, I'm sure. Honestly, like all the rest of them are.
Last 2 questions. We'll go Andrew Kelly followed by Chris Brown.
Hey, good morning, Bill.
Andrew?
So in big games, I know other coaches, and I'm not asking you to speak for them, have just discussed how they've factored in the emotion of it in the first quarter, and that's affected just the way they plan or prepare, communicate. Look, you got to expect, given the history here and the relationships, to feel something maybe a little bit extra. Is that something you factor into the kind of your expectation for how the game might start and the choices you might make, either offensively or defensively, to kind of account for that?
Yeah, I think you put it well. I think there's an element of that every week, and I'm not saying it's the same every week, but there's an element of every week. But in the end, when the ball's snapped, we have to play good fundamentals, good technique. We have to all be on the same page and know what the play is, and know what we're doing, and know what our assignment is, and know what adjustments we need to make based on what the opponent does. Whether it's a kicking play, an offensive play, or a defensive play, and that's football. And so when the players go out on the field and the coaches call the plays or make adjustments after the play or after the series, that's really what all of our jobs are, to perform on the field. Of course, there's an emotional element to the game, but ultimately it's based on performance. And the most important thing for all of us, every one of us that participates in the game, is to do our job and do it well, and to execute our part of the play, whatever that happens to be, and our assignment, and whatever adjustments we have to make at the highest level. So that's really what we all have to do, regardless of what the other circumstances are. the opponent, the weather, the crowd, the wind, personnel grouping that's on the field. Like, we've all been trained to execute in situations, and when those come up, then that's the competition, is our execution versus our opponents.
And last question, Chris Ryan.
Morning, Bill. How are you?
Good, Chris. How's it going?
Good. Wanted to get the final Tom Brady question of the weekend. And do you notice anything different stylistically in how he is running this offense as compared to the Patriots offense? Because Bruce Arians talked several times about his input. And I'm curious, do you notice anything different in how this offense is put together?
Yeah, I'm not really sure I understand the question. I don't know what different means. We've looked at it. We looked at last year's games. We looked at this year's games. Look, Coach Arians certainly, has a very, developed passing offense. He has ever since he's been in the league, whether it was at Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, Arizona, Tampa. And it's not like they never threw the ball with him. There are certainly a lot of his concepts that you see. But I think he said this week, a lot of the concepts in football, every team runs in a passing game. And I think that's true. There's probably a high percentage of passing concepts that every team runs. Vertical routes, spacing routes, man beaters, zone beaters, so forth. And then each team has its own, depending on who the quarterback and the receivers and the offensive coordinator or head coach's play calling philosophy is. They have other things that are kind of more emphasized in their system. But I would just say in general, this is a very good passing offense. It's well designed. It attacks defenses. It attacks coverages, and it's well executed by obviously the coaching staff that has put it together with all the players, not just the receivers, but the protections. As I mentioned earlier, those have to be coordinated with everything that you're doing. The variety of routes and concepts that they employ to stress and challenge the defense. So, who exactly does what on all that? I don't know. Certainly, I'm sure that Tom has a lot of input. I'm sure that Coach Leftwich has a lot of input. I'm sure that Coach Arians has a lot of input. And they do a lot of things, I would say, repeatedly, so that that's just what they do, and they execute them well. And I'm sure from game to game, like every team, they have some ways to go after the opposing defense based on whether it's personnel matchups or coverage tendencies or so forth, and that's based on that particular game. Again, it's what we do, it's what they do, it's probably what most teams do. So, who exactly does what? You'd have to ask them that. I do think that there are, again, a lot of plays that look familiar to us, but again, that's true every week. It's not like things that we do, no other team in the league does that, and I've never said that, and that's not the case. Concepts are concepts, and there may be a little variation in the way one team does it from the next, but conceptually it's the same idea of who you're trying to put stress on in the defense. And so, as I said, they do a good job of it. They have a lot of variety. They do it out of different looks with different people. A lot of it are the same concepts, but it looks differently to the defense, and it plays differently to the defense because you might have different people on the field based on the group that they run it out of. So that's, those are, I would say, pretty common. I'd say that the thing about Tampa is they're very good at it. I mean, they lead the league in passing because they execute the passing game well. And that's, again, a team execution. It's not all to one player. It's not all one protection. It's not all one route. I mean, they throw the ball well on early downs. They throw the ball well on third down. They throw 2-minute red area. And they have a lot of different receivers, backs, and tight ends that contribute to that. And certainly Tom does, does a great job, as he always has, of recognizing where the weak spot in the defense is and getting the ball to the player who has the best opportunity. He's always done a great job of seeing that, recognizing it, making quick decisions, and hitting the vulnerable spot in the defense. So that's, why he's one of the reasons why, he's such a great player. But yeah, systematically, it's broad, and it's well executed.
Thanks, Bill.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Together.
When did Bud Light Seltzer start making lemonade? Probably when 2020 handed us all those lemons.
New Bud Light Seltzer Lemonade, packed with lemonade flavor after a lemon of a year.
Opponents? I've gone up against thousands.
And there's an opponent we're all up against, COVID-19.
But there's a way to beat it. Get vaccinated.
So when it's your turn, roll up your sleeves.
And let's get to the finish line. Together.
When did Bud Light Seltzer start making lemonade? Probably when 2020 handed us all those lemons.
New Bud Light Seltzer Lemonade, packed with lemonade flavor after